Can you stay? Hello everybody, I hope you're all having a swell Sunday. My name is Em and welcome to my channel. I'm so excited that I finally started a YouTube channel. I was telling myself for so long that I wanted to, and like I've just been lazy, or I had stuff going on, or I just kept making excuses for myself. But here we are. So today I just wanted to talk about 5 of my top tips and advice for art students specifically, but I guess this could apply to any major in college. Just tips for freshmen so you know what to expect and you kind of know how to mentally prepare yourself. So without further ado, let's get into tip number 1. Okay, so my first tip is, I have a little list right here, is that it's okay to feel inferior. Coming from high school, especially in a small town, I was one of the only like art kids. So everyone only told me good things. They're like, oh, you're so good, you're so talented. And even in art classes, it was never about being a good artist. It was about participation. So you're not really going to get a solid critique from a high school art class. So seeing in an art school everybody being good at art, it can be intimidating. And lots of times I see people who I know are 10 times better than me, at least in my head, but I know that's okay now, and I've gotten used to that. Just don't let that get to you so much. There's always going to be someone who you think is more talented than you, but then again, there's definitely people out there who will think that you are way more talented than them, and so it's really just this vicious cycle where no one ever feels good enough. But you really have to tell yourself that it's okay if you're not the best artist, because at the end of the day, what's going to get anyone a job, despite their major or what they studied, is hard work and dedication, ability to communicate with other people, and just basic social and business skills. So hopefully that makes you feel a little bit better, but it's alright to feel inferior every once in a while. Just don't let it get to you that much. Okay, so my second tip is, not to be too attached to your work. Now this relates to the first tip, but basically there's a bunch of critiques that you will experience in your college years, and it's important not to be too attached to your work, because you go in for extra help, if you go in for a critique, if there's a consultation with your professor during your process work, your professor will not hold back. They will take an eraser and erase entire portions of your piece. You'll take a pencil and start editing things right in front of your face. And there's been many times where I have just stood there like, you just ruined everything I made. But you just have to let it go, because they're doing it to help you out. Just remind yourself that, and try not to get too attached to stuff, because frankly there are times when you need to edit stuff and there's times when you just need to start over, and it's important to get used to that. Alright, so my third tip is to not procrastinate. So this is easier said than done, and I'm definitely guilty of procrastinating a lot. But especially as an art student, it's important not to procrastinate, especially when you're doing your studio work, just because it's hard to guess how long stuff will take. For instance, in high school, I got really used to the homework and the type of work I was doing, so I could definitely guess almost with 100% certainty how long each assignment would take me. However, considering the critique, what you may have to change, like your techniques, if you're doing anything correctly, your work may take way longer than you think it will. Especially if you're in the middle of a piece and you're like, oh, I'm not really feeling like it, but I'll just push it off for another day, I'll do it later. That can be dangerous, just because you never know. You really just never know how long it's gonna take. And especially if you go to critique, you go to special extra help, then you may figure out you have a lot more work than you thought you did. Alright, so my fourth tip is to not prioritize your studio classes over your lecture classes. Now, for those of you who aren't aware, studio classes are like your art-based classes. So those you will be in the studio, painting, drawing, working on a computer, like animating, illustrating, whatever. But your lecture classes are just normal, like math, science, history kind of thing. It's important not to totally prioritize your studio classes over your lecture classes just because lecture classes are hard, man. They're difficult and they also require a lot of attention. So even though you're here for art and you may think, oh, it's not that important, it doesn't matter, if you're falling behind in your lecture class, you're gonna have to retake it and you're gonna be in school longer than you want to be. That being said, if you know you're gonna have more homework in one of your studio classes, it's okay to like focus more on that, but all I'm saying is just make sure your lecture classes, you're still keeping up with your work there, because that's very important. Alright, and then my last tip and a piece of advice to you is to be active in critiques. So most classes you will have a critique where you sit around and you talk about everybody's art and what they're doing better or worse and what's working and what's not.
Excuse me.
So it's important to be active and to talk about other people's stuff, and don't just say, oh, that's bad or that's good, oh, it looks really great. Just tell them why it's good, why it needs work, and what they can do to work on that. That type of critique is really helpful, and it's very important to have, especially when you go into class, you get a bunch of positive feedback from students, but then you turn in your work and you get not that good of a grade, and it's very confusing because you are under the impression that you're doing good and you should keep continuing. But if no one gives you feedback, you really just don't know. So it's important to be active, and if you are active and give other people advice, they are more apt to give you that advice too. Alright, so that was my 5 pieces of advice for incoming art students at any art institution. Why was that such a difficult word for me to say? I hope this is helpful to you, and even to those of you who aren't studying art, but yeah, I just hope that was at least a little bit helpful, just because these are things I really wish I knew when I first started going to art school. But above all, just make sure you don't get too overwhelmed. It's gonna be okay, and you're gonna do awesome. Alrighty, so that is it for this video today. I will see you guys next time, and have a good one and a sweet Sunday.